Hello everyone, welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. This is going to be Fantasy Football 101, Beginner's Guide to Fantasy Football, episode number 7. Today we're going to go over trades, and then we're going to look at how do I know when I should make a trade on my team, how to analyze trades, how to find the best trade, how to communicate when you're doing trade talks with other teams, and then looking at the veto process as well, and my thoughts regarding that. So first off, I'm going to take a look at Fantrax League here that I'm in. This was our startup contract league. So this was my team. We're just going to show you how to do a trade in here. So if you're on Fantrax, it's pretty simple. You're going to go to your team. Who do you want to trade? I actually need to do a trade in this league because we did a trade, but I haven't processed it yet. So I traded Carlos Hyde, and then you can click on him, and it'll ask which team you want to trade him to. I'm going to do the Raiders, and then I'm going to hit the next button, and it'll take me over to his team. And from there, I'm trading for Duke Johnson. And then, in this case, I can hit submit. And then that just says, I submitted a trade proposal. It says the transaction has been received. It was awaiting acceptance from the other team. You can also click here for pending transactions, and it will show the trade. We actually already made this trade in this league. I just haven't processed it yet. I can talk to you guys a little bit about my reasoning for this trade. Since this was a dynasty league, Duke Johnson is a little bit younger than Carlos Hyde, and I think Duke Johnson has a little bit better opportunity to get some playing time, especially if David Johnson gets hurt, or the Texans can use him as a different way, or if David Johnson's not there next year or so. But pretty much my team, I didn't spend a lot of money at the running back position. I got Kareem Hunt, Adrian Peterson, Chris Thompson. I just got a bunch of guys that were like the minimum amount of money. So like my strategy with that, I wasn't really trying to get all these real cheap guys, but I didn't want to invest too heavily in the running back position. So I took a flyer on Carlos Hyde. He was a free agent still then. I signed him for the minimum. The Raiders team, that was G's team that we talked to earlier in the deeper look into dynasty segment. After Carlos Hyde signed with Seattle, he had Chris Carson, so it made sense for him to trade for the handcuff. We also added 2 picks in the trade. I think I traded him my 6th round pick in next year's rookie draft, and he traded me his 7th round pick. So either way, those are 2 pretty much wild card picks anyways. Overall, I just didn't have a lot of running back depth. I thought Duke Johnson provides a little bit better opportunity and depth for me, or that he score more points than Carlos Hyde will this year. I've never been too crazy on Carlos Hyde in general, so that's just a little bit about my thoughts in there. That's pretty much how to do it on Fantrax. In general, when you're trading for fantasy football, you're giving up something, and the person you're trading with is also going to give up something. So in this case, I gave up Carlos Hyde, a running back, for Duke Johnson, another running back. And then we also, like I said, we put some picks in the trade as well. And you don't always trade the same position for position. So you might trade a wide receiver for a running back, a quarterback for a running back. That's a lot more common where you trade different positions. You can also do different trades. Maybe you trade a running back and a wide receiver for a better wide receiver. Real briefly, how to do it on Fantrax. If you look over at ESPN, now if we look over at ESPN, once again, this is my baseball league, but the concept's still the same. If I want to make a trade in ESPN, what I need to do is I'm going to go up here to the opposing teams tab. We're going to go down to a team. I'm just going to select G's team in this league as well. You're going to go down here, hit the proposed trade button. So we're just going to pick a player in this situation. So I'm just going to hit one guy here, hit continue, and then it's going to show the player I'm trying to trade for up here. Then it shows me my players, and then I just pick whichever players I want to add to this trade. So we're just going to pick him, and then you can either hit the cancel trade offer if you screwed up and you want to start over, or if you want to submit that trade, you're just going to click finalize trade offer. It's going to show you, are you sure you want to offer this trade to that team? So it shows you what you're offering to the team, what you're requesting from them, so what you're giving up and what you're trying to get in return from them. So if you want to do it, then hit confirm. I'll do that. It's going to show up once again in that pending moves, kind of like we talked about with the FAB system. And then say if you submitted this trade and then you realize, hey, the player that you were just trying to trade for got hurt, the trade hasn't been responded to yet, and you want to cancel it real quick, you just go here, cancel the trade, and it's gone. So that's pretty simple. When should I make a trade in fantasy football? Just kind of like with how I mentioned with the waiver system. You don't want to overreact and you don't want to underreact either. So on this team, just say Marvin Jones. Let's just use Marvin Jones as an example for this league. So I got him as like a starting wide receiver right now. I got him. and I probably put like Jameson Crowder, Dante Johnson, Will Fuller, people like that, D.D. Lamb. I'm not going to go out and trade kind of like with the waivers. You don't want to overreact, and especially like in this team, it's a dynasty, so these are mostly younger guys, mostly guys that I expect to be on my team for a while. I don't want to go out and trade them right away because they're just not performing for like the first couple weeks. But say you're halfway through the year, we'll use an example down here. So I got John Ross. I picked up John Ross real late, just kind of as a flyer, real cheap. If you're doing like redraft or a dynasty league where you're not doing contracts, maybe you pick up John Ross later in the draft. You just take a flyer on him. Say, hey, he's fast. He's never really been healthy, but say, what if he's healthy? He's playing with Joe Burrow. Maybe he'll put up some big numbers. You just want to test that out. You get 10 games into the season and you see John Ross isn't doing anything. Maybe you want to turn around and flip John Ross for a different asset at that point. So maybe you just want to trade him for a backup running back, see if that backup running back gets a shot later in the year or in the future, like if you're playing Dynasty. That's one approach to it. And then like a different approach is like I was saying, my team doesn't have a lot of, like it's got running back depth, but it doesn't have a lot of star power or very good point scorers at the running back position. Kareem Hunt's kind of like my best running back right now, and he's in timeshare in Cleveland. But I like him a lot for Dynasty because he's only on the 1-year contract with Cleveland. So if he signs anywhere else, he's going to be a running back one pretty much anywhere else that he signs. So that's kind of my thought process with that. And with Dynasty, you kind of want to build more for the long term than the short term. With my team overall, I got guys that are going to be good for a while, and then I kind of filled in some of the other holes with guys that are a little bit older. Maybe Adrian Peterson, maybe he's got 1 good year left in Washington. He says he wants to play for 4 more years, but we'll see if that happens. You got Marvin Jones. He just turned 30, but definitely got talent. He puts up numbers. It's just, for him, it's always been a question of injuries. But say my team's real competitive. Adrian Peterson's not doing anything. Kareem Hunt's doing all right. But then I got Duke Johnson, Chris Thompson, Jeff Wilson. Say they don't do anything. I'm in a position where I can compete for the playoffs. Maybe I have a little bit extra depth at wide receiver. So maybe John Ross does a little bit of something. So maybe I trade him off for a running back then to try to make it further in the playoff push. Trading's more about being able to evaluate your assets. So taking a look at your team, what do I have a surplus of? If I got a lot of good wide receivers or a wide receiver that could start on my team that I'm not using or I can't put in my flex spot. Maybe I take that wide receiver and trade him for a running back. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe I got 5 starting caliber running backs, but I only got 3 positions to play them at. So if you got 4, then you have 1 guy to fill in for like bye weeks or if somebody gets injured. So maybe you can trade that 5th one off and get a 2nd wide receiver or a 3rd wide receiver that you need to start for the league. Or maybe you can turn them into a better tight end. Or kind of like what I was talking about with waivers is, say you get 2 really good tight ends. For this league, I just have Eric Ebron. I think he'll have a decent year in Pittsburgh. Kind of bounce back year. But say I had Eric Ebron and Darren Waller. And Darren Waller is doing good. Eric Ebron's having a good year. Maybe I sell high on Eric Ebron, try to trade him and get a running back. Or a wide receiver or quarterback. Or in this league, since we are doing the individual defensive players, you could trade them off for somebody like that as well. There's just a lot of different ways to look at trades. And like I was saying, you have to look at what your team's strengths and weaknesses are. But like at the same time, you don't want to overreact. I don't want to be like my running backs are bad, so I'm not just going to trade Patrick Mahomes away to get a whole bunch of running backs. That's kind of trades in a nutshell. One thing I'd like to say though too is be sure to evaluate every offer. And even if a trade offer that you receive from somebody or one that you make to somebody, even if it's not a favorable offer or you might consider a bad offer, you can always send a counter offer. A trade doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be you just, this is what it is, take it or leave it. Sometimes it gets down to that after you go back and forth, make counter offers for a little while, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And part of the most important thing with trades is communication. So you want to be able to communicate with the people in your league. So there's different ways you can do this. I'm going to go over to ESPN. You can go on ESPN, you can go to the league, you can go down to members. And then if you want to email anybody in your league, if you're playing on an ESPN league, there's a little button here that says send email. So if I'm going to click on that, I'm just going to try to send G an email. That's who we're sending it to. We can put a subject. So we could type in here, trade, and then just say, hey, I am looking for help at, you can do anything real basic. You can just say, hey, I know we haven't made a trade in the past. I'm looking for some help at running back. I have a couple extra wide receivers to spare. Just let me know if there's some. You just want to have a good starting point. Essentially, when you're going out, you're emailing, or if you're in a league where you have other people's phone numbers, or if you're in a Discord, you guys use Discord or GroupMe or some form of group chat or anything like that, or you have them on Facebook or whatever it is. You have a good line of communication with other people. When you start out, just say, hey, I'm looking for help at this position. Let me know if there's anybody on my team that interests you. You could even say that, hey, I'm looking for running backs. I know you have Melvin Gordon and somebody. Would you be willing to trade one of them? It's just, you want to be open to communication. So you don't want to just be like, hey, I just want this one guy on your team and I'm going to give you this. Because that's the same as just making like a blind trade offer. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time, that one's not going to work for you. And part of what I do a lot of times in leagues, especially like if you're in a small league, you got 8 teams, 10 teams, 12 teams. It's not that hard to message every single person in your league. Maybe it takes you 10 minutes out of your time. But the rewards for doing so are very fruitful. Even if you don't make a trade with somebody, if you open up that communication, then it also leads to possibilities to have later trades. One other thing that I like to talk about in trades too is, say you're giving up 2 players, and so you go out, you offer, in my league over here, we're going to offer Adrian Peterson and Carlos Hyde. We're going to click the next button. Offer for Josh Jacobs. So we're going to hit submit here, right? In this example, we offer 2 running backs for 1 running back. In theory, it might sound good because the person you're trading with is getting 2 players. But at the same time, if they already have a full roster, one of them players they're going to keep for sure. But say that second player you're offering isn't better than somebody they already have on their roster, they're just going to end up cutting that player. And there's no value to be had for them. So that can also be like sometimes how you insult team owner. Is you're offering a trade, but it doesn't seem good. They're getting 2 players and you're getting 1 player. Like the math behind it sounds good, but if the players you're giving up don't have equal value to what they're giving up, the trade's not going to happen. Or you could look at it the opposite way. Somebody offers you 3 players for your 1 player. So say I got Patrick Mahomes. Somebody offers me Daniel Jones, Deshaun Jackson, and Tyler Boyd. Well, in theory, this might sound good because I'm getting 3 players. So I get a quarterback to replace my quarterback that I'd be trading. I get 2 wide receivers. So I'm giving up Patrick Mahomes. So if these 2 wide receivers aren't better than any of the 2 wide receivers I'm already starting, they don't really have value to me. And I'm making my quarterback position worse at the same time. Plus, if I'm getting 3 players and I don't have any open slots, then I got to cut 2 guys. So even if I'm getting Deshaun Jackson and Tyler Boyd, are they better than the 2 guys I'm going to cut? Or am I going to have to cut somebody I like lower on my roster that I think has a chance to do well, and then somebody else picks them up and then maybe does well with them? A lot to think about. A lot of the times what I like to do is I like to do even trades. So maybe 1 player for 1 player or 2 player for 2 player. Sometimes it's kind of hard to do 1 player for 1 player. 2 players for 2 players, 3 players for 3 players, or 2 players for 3 players. That's kind of like the sweet spot sometimes. So maybe you start out the negotiation, you're talking about 1 guy you like, they're talking about 1 guy they like, and you get to the point where, hey, these guys are pretty similar value, but maybe you're giving up a wide receiver and you're getting a running back from them. Maybe you want to have another wide receiver. So in our example, we'll just say I'm giving up Will Fuller and Adrian Peterson. And we're going to get back Chris Carson. We'll say Chris Carson. So Chris Carson's a little bit better than Adrian Peterson at this point in their careers. So instead of trading Will Fuller for Chris Carson straight up, maybe I'm giving up Adrian Peterson so he has a running back to cover his running back hole, and then I'm going to take back somebody to replace Will Fuller who's not as good as Will Fuller at this point. So maybe I get back Adam Humphries or someone, or Deshaun Jackson or someone like that. You know, Deshaun Jackson, that example, might be as good as Will Fuller at this point in their career. They're both very injury prone and boom bust plays, but Fuller does have youth on his side. So we'll just say that. So I'm going down a little bit in the wide receiver position, but I'm making an upgrade at the running back position. So that way you kind of cover yourself on both ends. That's a little bit how I like to think about trades. If you guys have any questions about trades, maybe somebody offers you a trade during the season, you want some help or advice with it, just reach out, ask me, whether it's in the comments, email, the Facebook page, anything like that. I'll give you my advice, but ultimately the final decision does come down to you. Then lastly, what I'm going to talk about with trades is vetoes. Every league is going to have a little bit different veto process. With that being said, some leagues might have it where the commissioner only can make the veto. So I make a trade, I trade Adrian Peterson for Josh Jacobs. Nobody's going to think this is a good trade in Dynasty because Adrian Peterson's 35 years old, Josh Jacobs 22 years old. Adrian Peterson's at least in a committee, maybe even cut by the Redskins. Josh Jacobs, he's the starting running back for the Raiders. So this isn't going to be a fair trade. This is a trade that would get vetoed 99% of the time. So in the league, or where the league manager or the commissioner has the power to veto only, then ultimately it comes down to that person to veto the trade. There's also different systems where we got 10 teams in the league. This trade goes up. If 6 people vote against it, it's going to get vetoed. Usually you need a majority to veto. Every league will have a little bit different rules. Sometimes ranking system, or if so many people vote to approve the trade or deny the trade and give their reasonings, then once it meets a certain threshold, it either gets approved or vetoed. Be sure you are familiar with your league's vetoing process, and be sure that you are active in this process. If your league allows you to vote on trades, you should always vote on trades if you need to. Like, you don't need to vote on every single trade. There's a 1-for-1 trade and it's real fair. Everybody knows it's fair. You don't need to vote on that. But if there's a trade that you really think is unfair or veto worthy, you need to speak up, say something. Because maybe you got other people in your league that aren't going out of their way to say something. Maybe they're afraid to say something. Maybe they're thinking the same way you are. But if you stand up, other people are more likely to stand up. And then maybe that trade was really unfair or veto worthy. Then it balances out the league. Because maybe you got the guy that's in the last place and they're just trading away their players for whatever. And then the team that's in first or second place, they're getting all these good players. And then you're losing your chance at winning the league just because some other guy gave up pretty much. So it's pretty much to avoid that. Some leagues will only veto if they think a trade has collusion in it. It's kind of like what I just described, where like a team's getting their butt kicked and then they give up their players to some other team. So you never want to see a trade that's like completely lopsided. Hey, we gave you all our starting players and we got all your backup players, so now somebody's got a super team. So most leagues will have something kind of in place to prevent that, whether it's the veto system or anything like that. I've also seen leagues where people are just like, oh, I'm done with the league, so then they cut like all their players and then they're just out there for a massive waiver thing. Don't be the guy that does that. No, like, it's not fun for anybody, and then like it's a mess to clean up. You could end up with a super team, or there should be, make sure your league has some type of penalty for that as well. So this is a brief overview of trades. Trades in general is a little bit harder to explain, but what you need to do is be able to look at your team, see where your strengths and weaknesses are. If you need to make a trade, then go out of your way, communicate with other people, see what's out there, see what people are open to doing, just gauge interest. And you can go out, talk to people, gauge interest multiple times throughout the year. Doesn't mean you have to make a trade. At that point, it doesn't mean whether it's with one team or another or any team at all. Like, you could talk to teams throughout the whole year and never make a trade with any team. But what that does is, say you're in this league for 5 years, you guys have been talking about trades or what you think about other people's trades for a while. Now you got this communication build up, so when you do want to make a trade, or one of you does need to make a trade or acquire a player, then it gives you a little bit easier time negotiating with that person, or they're open to trading with you. And then, like, the last thing I'll say about trades too is, like, say if you need a running back, you look out and there's no good running backs out on the waiver wire, or nobody that has a good matchup that week, or or they're going to be a starter, or they're not even flex worthy. That's when you really need to make the trade. Is when you got the hole on your team. You can't just go out and patch it up with waivers real quick. At the same time, while I say that, you also can look on waivers, say maybe you need a running back, but there isn't a good running back out there to patch your hole. Maybe there's a great wide receiver this week, and you bid up a bunch of fab on this good wide receiver on the week, maybe you can turn around and flip him to somebody else that was trying to bid on him. So a lot of times in leagues, say I bid $38 on a wide receiver, and I see the other guy, he bid $35. Well, I know he wants him pretty bad. Maybe I don't need that wide receiver. Or I can take that wide receiver, trade him to that team, or I can take one of my other wide receivers, trade him to a team for that running back that I need. There's a lot of little different strategies. It's just figuring out how your league works, how people within your league work, and like I said, communication once again. So that's pretty much it for this episode. If you guys liked and enjoyed this episode, leave a thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. If you're subscribed or just newly subscribed, make sure you turn on the notifications. It'll let you know more about this series. This is going to be one of the last episodes for Fantasy Football 101. I think what we'll look at next for this part of the series is going in, trying to do a mock draft and show you guys how that process works. We'll probably be using the Fantasy Pros mock draft simulator once again. We'll just kind of do a team on there. We're going to be doing a lot of that when we start talking about different strategies. But for the basic beginner's edition of this series, that will be the final episode. Then we'll start talking about different strategies, how to apply them. We'll show them in a mock draft setting. And then from there, we'll kind of talk about different players I like for this season, whether it's a sleeper, people that I think will finish a little bit higher than they're going now, players to avoid. If you guys have any other questions about trades, anything else in general, suggestions you'd like to see on the channel, just let me know. Whether it's down in the comments, an email, on Facebook. That's all we have for today. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.